as some of you might know, because I have sort of mentioned it here and there in some of my videos, I am originally from South Africa and I moved to Northern Ireland um, nearly 4 years ago. So, been here almost 4 years. And I just thought it might be useful or valuable to make a video about my experiences, the positive and negative, to perhaps, provide some perspective to those people who are thinking of immigrating, whether you're thinking of immigrating from South Africa or whether you're thinking of coming to Northern Ireland or both. Perhaps what I have to say might be of some benefit to you. Um, Maybe a good place to start is just by briefly explaining what prompted me to leave South Africa. Now, I think, as many people might be aware, South Africa has actually seen an exodus of people over the last 20-ish years. People have been immigrating out of South Africa in droves, and that is mostly due to the socioeconomic problems and, in particular, the high crime rate. I personally was a victim of crime numerous times. I had my house broken into 3 times whilst I was living on my own, which was very scary and nerve wracking. And I really struggled to feel at peace in my own home. I was, had become paranoid about safety, and it just, it's not a nice way to live if you've ever experienced that. My family also were the victims of a pretty serious crime. They had their house broken into. So my mom, my stepdad, and my younger brother. This was roughly 13 years ago. They had their house broken into. They were tied up. Um, had guns pointed in their faces whilst the burglars cleaned out, most of their possessions and certainly stole everything of value. And of course, the most important thing is they weren't harmed physically, thank goodness. But they could have been, and it was obviously an incredibly frightening experience. In that particular case, the people responsible were actually caught and imprisoned, which is obviously a good outcome, but that is very often not the case. Many, many, many people in South Africa are victims of crime on a daily basis, and very often uh, justice is not served. So I must say, I have always, since as far back as I can remember, I have always loved South Africa and always had an intense feeling of loyalty to my home country. And I never thought I would be one of those people who would leave. Um, I was sure that I wouldn't. I loved South Africa that much. But I must say, when my family was broken into and I kind of became face to face with how close the danger was and how easily they could have been seriously hurt, um, or how easily something terrible could have happened. Um, it really did change my feelings about South Africa, and it's from that day onwards. South Africa started to not feel like home to me. Instead, it started to feel like a place where I had to be constantly on the lookout for my safety and the safety of people that I cared about. And I think if you have ever been a victim of crime, um, you might be able to relate to that. It changes you when you really feel under threat, or someone that you love is under threat. Um, you you see things differently, and you feel differently about, you know, maybe some circumstances that didn't bother you before. So that was a big part of why I decided to leave South Africa. Um, Another reason, and it's a reason I think is which is cited by a lot of people, is just the real lack of services, basic infrastructure and services in South Africa. This is not, it won't be anything new or shocking to South Africans or to people who have lived in South Africa in recent years, but so many basic services in South Africa are just so inconsistent. The most notable of which is the electricity situation. I'm actually quite surprised at how much of the world is unaware of the fact that South Africa experiences daily power outages, almost daily. Certainly several times a week, people in South Africa, all over the country, go without power for several hours at a time, and often multiple times a day. That's just a way of life there now. It's just what people have become used to. It's just how things are. And that is challenging. I take my hat off to South Africans who are able to kind of get through that, and who take it in their stride and make the best of it. But I really struggled with that. So I will say it's nice to not have to deal with that anymore. Um, the, the lack of kind of proper government services is also a big issue. Anytime you need to have something renewed, or you need to get a license for something, or you need to rely on the government for something, it tends to be an incredibly long, tedious, and unreliable process that just can create significant issues in your life. I was incredibly fortunate in that I was able to get the documents that I needed in order to apply for a visa to immigrate. But I know that plenty of people are in a situation where they are unable to get the documents that they need in order to, do important things in their life, not just immigrate, but just, travel and other things, just simply because of how unreliable so many of the government services are. People waiting on passports and birth certificates and all this sort of thing. It's just really very frustrating, and there's nothing you can really do because, you know, except for what some South Africans do is they turn to agents who charge exorbitant fees to kind of try and sort these things out for them, and then it's kind of a system of bribes and corruption that I personally don't want to be a part of. And lots of people, I think, don't want to be a part of that and just feel that they have no choice if they're, but they're just desperate to get their documents or to get things done. So um, that is a challenging aspect of living in South Africa. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't many things that I love about South Africa, because of course there are. South Africa is a beautiful place. I really miss the wildlife. I miss the landscape. I miss the natural beauty of South Africa. Africa is a very special place when it comes to nature and wildlife and animals and natural beauty. It's unlike anywhere else on earth, and I do really miss that. But ultimately, on the whole, I just felt like my quality of life was really negatively affecting me and my mental health. And specifically the safety aspect. And I do feel this is another thing I haven't really heard people who have left South Africa really talk about, but something that I was definitely very aware of is that South Africans kind of tend to become quite insular in an attempt to protect themselves from crime and from a lot of the negative realities that they have to deal with every day. And I think it really breaks down the sense of community and connection between people, which I was very aware of. I was always kind of aware that everyone around me always had their guard up, and that there was sort of this kind of suspicious self-preservation undercurrent running, you know, through most of the people that I met and interacted with every day. So that always made me very sad. I feel as if South Africans really have a hard time letting their guard down, and they do build up like a tough exterior, and these coping mechanisms to try and deal with life, which are not actually super healthy. And so I just really found myself longing for a different life, a life where I could feel safe, where I could more easily connect with people, where people hadn't become so kind of cynical and hardened to a lot of these negative realities. Um, and I have loved Ireland and Irish culture for a long time. There's many aspects about it that I loved, that I loved even before I ever visited Ireland. Uh, the mythos and the fairy tales and legends that come out of Ireland have always really appealed to me. I love the way that the Irish talk. I love the way how straight talking and funny and charming they are. And I love Irish music. I love Irish dancing. Just everything about the culture really appealed to me even before I visited. And then in 2013, I visited the south of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and I fell in love with it even more. I loved every minute of being there. And in actual fact, by the time my 2 week holiday was over and it was time to go home, I actually didn't even want to get on the plane. I thought, wow, would anyone miss me? What would anyone do if I just didn't get on my plane today, if I just stayed here? And I really, really fantasized about just staying in Ireland and not going home. And that was kind of a wake up call to me. And I thought, wow, if I feel this way, then like maybe this is where I'm meant to be. And I vowed to return, and I've had a love affair with Ireland ever since. I think a lot of people will probably be able to relate to what I'm saying. It's a very magical place, Ireland. Um, in spite of its problems, Ireland is not a perfect place. And in spite of that, it is a very magical place, and it is something that is palpable and that you really do need to experience for yourself, I think. Um, and so I was just very, very drawn to Ireland. Now, a lot of people asked me, like, why did I not go to the Republic of Ireland? Why did I choose to come to the north? Well, that had to do with the visa that I was able to get. I got a UK visa because of family ties, and that meant that I was only able to stay within the territories of the UK. And that didn't include the Republic of Ireland, which is obviously a separate country, which is part of the European Union. So I didn't particularly feel any desire to go to England or Scotland or Wales. So I decided to come to Northern Ireland, and I thought, well, it can't be that different from the South. I'm sure that I will like it just as much as I did the Republic of Ireland. And so I moved here in 2020. I didn't know a soul. I came over by myself. I sold up all my things in South Africa, came over with just 2 suitcases. Actually, it was like one big suitcase and one slightly smaller suitcase, and that was it. I crammed as much as I could into those 2 suitcases, but that's all I came over with. I didn't know anybody. I'd never been to Northern Ireland before, and I just thought, well, I'll wing it. I will figure it out as I go along. Luckily, I had a work from home job at the time. And so my plan was to just initially continue to work from my computer and to just see, what I needed to do financially and see if I could apply for a job once I came over here. I didn't really know what things cost. I had a rough idea. I'd done some research into it before I came over, and I would recommend doing that. I would recommend researching the place that you're thinking of immigrating to. But I did have some savings. I'd been saving up every spare penny that I could for over a year. And so I had a bit of savings that could carry me through for a couple of months, which again, I think is a very good idea because when you're immigrating to a new place, you do need money for all kinds of things. Obviously, for your plane tickets and for potentially staying in temporary accommodation while you find a place to rent, a deposit for a rental house, all those sorts of things. The costs add up quite quickly. And I will say, um, if you are thinking of moving to either the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland, you do need to be aware of the fact that the rental market is quite competitive. That was a bit of a shock to the system for me. In South Africa, as long as you can afford to pay for the place that you want to rent and you have a clean credit history and you have don't have any kind of black marks against your name, you can pretty much rent, with no problem. Very quick, you can quickly find a place to rent and you won't have much difficulty getting a house. If anything, South Africa probably has a shortage of qualified tenants rather than an overabundance of qualified tenants, which is more the case over here in Ireland. Um, I'll speak for Northern Ireland maybe since I haven't lived in the South, but this is just what I've heard about the South. But I'll maybe stick to talking about the North. So in Northern Ireland, I would definitely say that there are probably more qualified tenants than there are um, decent houses to go around. Uh, that is very much location dependent. So if you're wanting to stay in one of the bigger towns or cities like Belfast or Portadown or, you know, Enniskillen even, any of those places, you are going to have a little bit more of a difficult time getting a place to stay because that is where most of the jobs are, and everyone is looking for accommodation in those areas. If you're willing to live in the countryside or in a smaller village or a smaller town where there aren't as many job opportunities, you will get a rental place probably much easier, or that was what I found. So that is something to bear in mind, and especially if you're wanting a nice place, if you want a house that's detached, that has a decent garden, that's really nice, that's not exorbitantly expensive, you're probably going to have quite a bit of competition um, for places like that. And it is just worthwhile knowing that ahead of time so that you leave yourself enough time to find a place because it can take several months to find the right place for you. It's not necessarily a quick process, and it can be quite kind of draining and disappointing as you see, all the nice houses getting snapped up. But anyway, if you hang in there, um, you know, hopefully, and you persevere and you keep your renting history really good, like you get good references from previous landlords and you make sure you have all your ducks in a row and you just make sure that you're a good tenant, eventually you will find something. So I was quite fortunate in the sense that the first place I moved to when I came to Northern Ireland was an Airbnb. And it just so happened that the Airbnb that I stayed in was actually the owner was actually looking for a tenant for that house. And so during the course of my stay there, I just happened to ask him, look, would you consider renting it to me? Because as it was an Airbnb, it was already kitted out with all the things that that I needed. It had bed linen, towels, crockery, cutlery, appliances. I didn't have to buy anything, so it was really convenient for me. And he agreed, and so that was very fortunate for me. And that is something that you like. I'm not saying it'll work out in all cases, but it is something to potentially consider if you are if you're immigrating and you're finding the whole issue of getting accommodation um, to be challenging, that's potentially something you could try. Um, so pros and cons of living in Northern Ireland. I think I'll start with the things that I really love about it here. Northern Ireland is very reasonable in terms of the cost of living, and I mean that when in terms of its comparison to the rest of the UK and also to the south of Ireland. Uh, the rest of the UK tends to be more expensive than Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland is definitely more expensive than Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland does kind of benefit from being sort of a little bit more isolated, and salaries are not as high in Northern Ireland, yes, but the cost of living is not as high either. So I found, when I compare Northern Ireland to South Africa, which South Africa's cost of living is relatively low, although it has gone up quite a lot in recent years. But even when I compare it to South Africa, I find that Northern Ireland is probably still a bit better. You can still probably afford a better quality of life on a very, very modest salary. And I think that that's fantastic. It's great. Rental prices are not too exorbitant. Cost of groceries and just generally services and your electricity and oil and all those sorts of things that you'll need, they tend to be affordable. Even if you're not earning a huge salary. So that's one great thing about Northern Ireland. The other thing that I really would be remiss not to mention is just how wonderfully kind and just courteous and straightforward Irish people are, and I really appreciate that. They're a very charming people in general. They're very ready to laugh, and they've always got a joke at the ready, and they're often very keen to hear your story and experiences if you are not from here. And so, in general, I find Irish people to be just really lovely. They're very nice for the most part. They're easy to get along with. They're generally no dramas type sorts of people. And they're very non-judgmental, very open-minded. As long as you are a decent enough person, I find that Irish people will pretty much not have any bother with you. And they very much are like a live and let live sort of a culture where as long as you don't behave like an asshole, they will leave you alone, let you get on with your life without too much bother. And personally, as an introverted person, I really enjoy the fact that Irish people will sort of respect your space. They are pretty good at just not being too intrusive or nosy, and I really like that. People everyone sort of seems to know and respect their place in society in Ireland, I find. And there's not too much kind of pushing people around or being judgmental or just causing unnecessary issues. So it's a very peaceful, harmonious society, I find. It's very cohesive, I think would be the main word that I would use to describe it. It's a very cohesive society. And the communities here are very, very strong. There are very strong ties between people within communities. And even though there is still a little bit of tension between Protestants and Catholics in some parts of the country, within communities themselves, as I say, there tends to be a lot of cooperation, very strong ties, and that's something I really admire and respect about Irish people. I really do. They tend to look after their own, and they tend to be very family minded, and people don't struggle with kind of loneliness and isolation as long as they're part of a community over here. That's what I've observed. Um, the other thing about Ireland, and again, I'll speak about Northern Ireland specifically, is it's just an incredibly, incredibly beautiful place. doesn't matter where you drive in Northern Ireland, there's always something of natural beauty to admire. The countryside is just so lush and green, and there are just rolling hills and farms and trees and forests and lakes wherever you go. And I just honestly, I think there's nothing that's more of a tonic for the soul than on a sunny day, on a beautiful day with clear blue skies, driving through the Irish countryside. I don't think there's anything to beat that. It's such a sense of calmness and peace and tranquility um, that I have felt since moving here that I can't describe it, and it makes me quite emotional when I try to express how much I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate, as I say, the sense of peace and tranquility and the safety when I compare it to how I felt in South Africa, very kind of unsafe and insecure in terms of safety. It's a very different feeling here. It's just a really peaceful and, it's just a feeling that everything is right with the world a lot of the time. You can just kind of have quite a peaceful, tranquil life over here. So if that's something that's important to you, you will definitely find it here. Um, and obviously, being close to Irish culture, if that is something that you are really drawn to, as I am, that is another major positive of living here. I mean, I went to a festival in Sligo a couple of weeks ago, and people were just gathered around in the town square, in the center of town, just watching these musicians perform, and it was just such a wonderful, peaceful, culturally rich experience where everyone was just enjoying themselves and having a good time, and you could really feel that Irish sense of community there, and I just love it. There's lots of cultural experiences to be had here, and the Irish really, really do take a strong sense of pride in their culture. And, you know, that's again, it's something I really admire about them. I think it's something other cultures can learn from, that they're just so proud and loyal to the whole concept of being Irish, and they really do make a strong effort to keep their culture and their language and the music and all the things that go along with being Irish. They really make a strong effort to keep all of that alive. And I love that. I love being a part of it. I love being able to experience it. I love being able to admire it and, and feel like an honorary Irish person as as I, as I look on and as I kind of enjoy it. Um, and I'm sure there are things I'm going to leave out in this video as I talk about the positives. So, this is probably not going to be an exhaustive list, and maybe I might make a part two to this video. I don't know. I'm just thinking of things off the top of my head at the moment. Um, so what are some of the downsides of living in Northern Ireland for me as a South African? Um, I'll say there aren't a ton of downsides, but those downsides that there are have been quite kind of significant for me, I suppose, or I have really uh, noticed these downsides, and I suppose that's just what happens when you move to another country. It is quite a big adjustment, and I will say that as wonderful as Irish people are, as lovely and charming as they are, and as much as I admire them as a people, and as much as I love and respect the culture and their sense of community, I do find that it is the sort of place where if you are an outsider, if you were not born here, if you don't have family ties to the country, if you are not an Irish person, there is always this sense of being an outsider that I have felt since arriving here. And it is something that is quite palpable in certain situations. Um, there is definitely kind of a stronger sense of loyalty between fellow Irish people and you, as someone who is from a different country. are sometimes just regarded with, like, yes, friendliness and interest, but sometimes maybe a little bit of suspicion. People don't have that same openness or sense of trust towards you because you're from a different place. And I found that quite difficult because it's something obviously that you, as a person from another country, as an immigrant, you can't help it. And you obviously want to make friends and be accepted and be part of the community. And it's just not really as easy as that. It's just something that you have to accept is not going to happen quickly or possibly even at all. And so it's something I've had to kind of come to terms with and accept. And I've had to kind of put my focus into building relationships with individual people who are open to connecting with me rather than kind of having this sense that I can be just a part of the community seamlessly, just like everybody else. And that is something, if you are considering immigrating, that is something I think it's very important to be aware of. Um, will it bother you to feel like an outsider? Because that is most probably something that you will experience. And how will you deal with that? And I do find Irish people, as much as they are friendly and lovely, and as much as I love them, there is like a bit of a guard up. I find if you are an outsider, if you are not from here, if you are not Irish, you'll always come up against a little bit of a wall. There'll be this kind of wall of politeness or this wall where they don't fully let you in. And that's not true for every single person. It's not true across the board. Obviously, you find individuals who will be open to you and who are the exception to that. But I find, as a general kind of idea, there is, a little bit of an impenetrable wall that if you are not Irish, you will find, hard to get beyond. Um, the other thing I will just say about Northern Ireland, and I hope this doesn't come across as too sort of complainy or whiny, is that I just do find that as much as Irish people are very, very easygoing, they're not a stressed people. They're really not. They're the sorts of people who tend to just take things in their stride and they don't tend to get overly stressed out about stuff, which is absolutely wonderful. I think it's fantastic for people's mental health and for that sense of peace and tranquility that I was describing earlier. But one of the, I suppose, the negative consequences of that is that things will take a long time to get done. You find that people will often take a long time to get back to you, or they might just not get back to you at all. There's quite a bit of flakiness. There's just everything seems to have very long waiting times, and things just take a long time to get done over here. I find whether that's hiring someone to do a job, or whether it's like sending away for some sort of um, document that you need, or whether it's applying to get your MOT for your car. Everything just seems to take ages, weeks and months on end. And you're just kind of expected to be patient, and you're not expected to complain or ask too many questions. You're just expected to accept that. And I have found that to be quite frustrating. And another thing that I find is that the processes and procedures of a lot of things are not really necessarily well explained. If you're not from here, you might find it a little bit difficult to figure out how things are done. It's something you really have to research and find out about yourself, and you really have to do your own research and to find out all the information that you need to know about various aspects of life over here, whether that's paying tax, or whether it's, what how the central heating systems work, or like whatever it is, anything you could conceivably think about, the public transport system, anything you could conceivably think about, you probably are going to have to do quite a bit of work to figure out all the ins and outs of how things work. Things are not really explained in a very straightforward way. This is just an observation that I personally have made. Maybe other people might disagree with me, but it's just something that I've noticed. I definitely think that it is something, you know, that I've noticed specifically over here. Things are not really necessarily well set out and clearly explained to people who are not familiar with how things work. You're expected to just ask a lot of questions and do a lot of your own research to find out how things work. And people are not necessarily always willing to sit down and explain things to you. So there's that. There's so many things that I've just had to figure out how things work just by trial and error, and in a lot of cases just by making a mistake or getting things wrong, or think by things going wrong. And it would have been nice to know a lot of these things beforehand. Um, so that is something as well. But for the most part, I love living here. I don't have a lot of complaints. It's very safe. It's very beautiful. If you like rain, it's a great place to live because it rains an awful lot. We're actually in the middle of a sort of a very hot, dry spell at the moment, but as I look outside, the clouds seem to be gathering, and I think we're probably about to get a storm. But hot, dry weather is fairly hard to come by, or it's rare enough, although it does happen. As I think we're going to be in for a nice long hot dry summer this year, but that is not the norm. Most of the time the weather is cool and wet, and so if you like that, then you'll love living here. It's certainly a very kind of it's a very unique and interesting and magical place, and it's got lots of quirks and characteristics that are unique about it. And I suppose there are things you either like or you don't. So my advice, anytime if it when it comes to immigrating, if you're considering immigrating and you're wondering if it's the right decision for you, is firstly, I would recommend that you visit the place that you're planning to immigrate to beforehand, and that you really, really do a kind of a real deep dive, or a really deep investigation into the various aspects of what it would be like to live in that place, and ask yourself, how would I feel experiencing all these different things, and is this something I could live with? Because if there are too many things about a place that make you unhappy, that feeling can add up quite quickly, and immigrating is difficult enough without all the added stresses of a place that just doesn't feel like a good fit for you. So that would just be my advice. But if you have any more questions for me about what it's like to live in Northern Ireland, or what it was like to immigrate from South Africa, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. So yeah, hope that you enjoyed this discussion, this wee chat, as we would say over here. And I will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye.